And US President-elect Donald Trump is just 2 days from taking office again. On the campaign trail, he made dozens of promises of what he would do on day one. Let's take a look at those promises now and how realistic it is for him to keep them.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. And I will end the electric vehicle mandate on day one. That will likewise be done on day one. Should I do day one, day two, or day three? How about day one, right?
Donald Trump has promised a very busy first day when he retakes the White House. In fact, he's made at least 59 distinct day one promises. Some he mentioned once and not again, but others were tied to major themes in his campaign. He said he'd end the war in Ukraine in a day. He promised to begin deporting undocumented immigrants. Pardoning January 6th rioters is another priority. Undoing environmental regulations and rolling back transgender rights were also big items in the campaign. Trump will face obstacles, however, getting those priorities passed, and some may be easier than others. The war in Ukraine is nearly in its third year, and Trump says he can end it in a day. He's threatened to cut military funding for Kyiv if it doesn't negotiate, and to send even more weapons if Moscow won't join. Since Trump's election victory, Ukraine has signaled that it doesn't expect to retake its lost territory by military force and may be open to talks. Illegal immigration across the US-Mexico border surged under Joe Biden's presidency. Trump has promised to deport 11 million undocumented immigrants. Experts say there are significant legal and logistical hurdles to doing that. But Trump may start with high-profile immigration raids to signal that he's keeping his promise. Pardoning January 6th rioters is a signal to his most devoted base of supporters that he has their back. It's well within the president's defined powers to give out such pardons. Trump hasn't said he'd pardon all the people convicted of crimes that day, including those who assaulted police or who organized violent activities. But he has said he might consider cases on an individual basis. On the environment, Trump has two obsessions. He's promised to roll back mandates on electric car production, which he says are killing the US auto industry. And he also wants to roll back bans on offshore oil drilling to increase domestic oil production. Experts say that more oil production likely won't have the effect on gasoline prices that Trump seeks, however. Transgender rights were a major MAGA theme during the campaign, the subject of one of Trump's most successful advertisements. He says that under his administration, there will only be 2 legal genders, has promised to ban transgender people from military service and keep transgender athletes out of sports. This may be easier said than done, since legal protections are part of federal law and can't be undone by an executive order. It'll be hard to get all this done on day one, but Trump supporters expect him to start enacting his agenda immediately.
And I'm joined now by Mike Cowburn, a political analyst focusing on US politics, in particular on presidential and congressional elections at the European University Viadrina. Thank you for joining us here on DW. And let me ask you, first of all, Donald Trump will take office on Monday, as we heard. What do you think he will really do first?
So as you mentioned in your report there, he's created this whole laundry list of different items of things that he wants to get done. Clearly, that's much more complicated than he's made out. I think, so starting from the top of that list, this idea of deportations, I think he's going to have to do some kind of high-profile deportations. Not that this will have any kind of wider bearing more generally on the US economy, but that he wants to show that as a signal to say, look, I promised you these mass deportations. Here's some examples of those happening. I think what we've seen is that there's been already some tensions within the MAGA world. We can think of those as being tensions between people like Elon Musk and people like Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon kind of represents the kind of white Christian nationalist part of the MAGA world. And then Elon Musk represents the kind of libertarian economic future world of this. At the moment, it looks like the Elon Musk world is winning a lot. So I think he's going to focus primarily on things like deregulation, like taking apart government institutions like the EPA, like the FCC, which is really what the kind of Musk and the tech bros that are now all lining up to support Trump really want to see happening.
And of course, there's a very important instrument for him to do a lot of the things that he had promised. And that instrument is called executive order. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. So in the US, passing legislation, getting it through both chambers of Congress, both the House and the Senate, can take a lot of time, can be a very time-consuming process. Even though the Republicans have majorities in both chambers, getting legislation through in this way is really time consuming. What we've seen in American politics really since the Obama presidency is therefore this huge expansion of the use of executive orders. Now, executive orders are things that the president can do that don't need to go through Congress. Now, that does mean that they're a little kind of weaker and that they can be undone a little easier. But certainly, I think, so you mentioned there, for example, transgender rights. I think this would be the kind of thing that Trump will look to solve with executive orders, or look to attack those rights using executive orders. And then he knows that he's got a very strong conservative majority on the Supreme Court. And so likely, if he's challenged about his ability to use executive orders in these areas, he'll feel very confident that the Supreme Court ultimately will come down on his side and support him in those use of executive orders.
About courts and judges, very briefly, Mike, if you could. What about the possibility of Donald Trump pardoning himself after his conviction in the hush money trial? Can he do that?
Again, there's not really much in the way of precedent here. The US framers did not expect to be in such a situation. So it's really vague in legal terms as to whether or not this is something he's allowed to do. And my hunch would be that he'll look to the Supreme Court again and say, look, I know I've got a 6-3 majority on most cases, a 5-4 majority in pretty much every case that I would want. And so he'll probably try this approach and then hope that the court backs him up. And really, it'll be a case for the courts to decide. Right. And like I say, we know that he's got a strong conservative majority on the Supreme Court, and he'll hope to use that.
All right. Well, so good speaking to you, Mike Cowburn, political analyst there. Thank you so much for your time, Mike.
Thank you very much.